Ethan Parker rubbed the sleep from his eyes and glanced at the small alarm clock on the cracked nightstand. The red digits glowed 6:12 a.m., mocking him with their precision. Another day had begun, and the weight of responsibility pressed on his shoulders as heavily as the peeling ceiling of his cramped apartment. He swung his legs off the bed, careful not to wake Grace, his 8-year-old daughter, who lay curled under a thin, faded blanket, her small chest rising and falling in steady, innocent rhythm. The sight of her, so peaceful and trusting, was the only light in Ethan's otherwise gray existence. The apartment smelled faintly of instant coffee and last night's dinner, remnants of a life lived with too little time and too little money. Ethan shuffled to the kitchen, grabbing the last slice of bread and a half-empty jar of peanut butter. As he spread the sticky layer across the bread, he calculated expenses in his head. Rent was overdue, the electric bill was another day away from cutoff, and Grace needed new shoes for school. Every coin, every dollar was accounted for, and yet it was never enough that Ethan's phone buzzed on the counter, a reminder that work was waiting. He checked it to find a message from his colleague, Cameron Rivers. "Don't forget the meeting at 9. You got this, man." Ethan smiled faintly, grateful for Cameron's consistent presence. At least someone in his life had faith that he could manage the chaos, even when he felt like he was failing. Grace stirred, opening one eye and yawning. "Morning, Dad," she mumbled, rubbing her tiny hands over her face. Ethan ruffled her hair gently. "Morning, Pumpkin. Go get dressed. Breakfast is ready." Her small feet patted across the creaking floorboards, the sound reminding him that this apartment had seen better days, though for them, it was home. After breakfast, Ethan dropped Grace off at her school, watching her walk toward the building hand in hand with other children, her backpack slipping slightly from her shoulders. A pang of guilt shot through him. He wished he could give her more, a bigger house, more toys, a life with fewer worries. But she didn't complain. She smiled, laughed, and gave him hugs that made all the hardship seem lighter, if only for a moment on his way to work. Ethan's thoughts wandered to the bills he had postponed, the envelope of overdue notices tucked into his jacket pocket like a secret weight. The city around him was bustling, filled with people who seemed to move with purpose that often eluded him. At the bus stop, he noticed a woman for the first time. She stood apart from the others, shivering slightly in a coat that had seen better winters, clutching a worn purse tightly against her chest. Her hair was a tangled halo around her face, eyes darting nervously as though she feared being seen. Something about her drew him in, though he couldn't say what. Perhaps it was the raw vulnerability etched into her expression, the same vulnerability he felt so often in himself. Without thinking, he approached her. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice low, careful not to startle her. The woman looked up, surprised, and for a moment, Ethan thought she might run. But instead, she smiled faintly, a mixture of relief and embarrassment. I'm fine," she said, though the quiver in her voice betrayed her words. "Just lost." Ethan studied her for a few seconds, debating whether to walk away or offer help. His mind flickered to the envelope in his pocket, the last $15 he had to his name. It wasn't much, but it could help someone in need. He reached into his pocket, pulling out the crumpled bills. "Here," he said softly, holding them out. "Take this. Maybe it'll help you get where you need to go." Her eyes widened, a mix of disbelief and gratitude washing over her face. I can't," she whispered. "I don't even know your name." "Ethan," he replied simply, shrugging. "Just Ethan." She hesitated, then accepted the money, clutching it like a lifeline. "Thank you," she said, her voice steady now, though her eyes glistened with unshed tears. "You don't know what this means." For a moment, Ethan felt a strange warmth he hadn't experienced in months. It wasn't just about giving money. It was about feeling capable, helpful, human. His own struggles, while heavy, seemed to pale in comparison to the relief he saw in her eyes. She offered him a small, shy smile before turning and walking away, fading into the crowd like a secret the city had swallowed. Ethan lingered for a moment, watching her disappear. A part of him wanted to call after her, ask her name, make sure she was safe. But another part recognized the fragility of the moment, the magic of doing something unselfish without expectation. He let it go, tucking the image of her thankful expression into his mind like a small treasure. As he continued to work, Ethan's thoughts remained with her. Cameron's message flashed in his mind again, and he chuckled softly at the timing. You got this, man. In a way, today's small act of kindness had reminded him that he could still make a difference, that even when life felt relentless and unfair, his actions still mattered. That evening, Ethan returned home, weary but lighter somehow. Grace ran to meet him at the door, backpack swinging, her laughter filling the small apartment with a sound that seemed to push back the shadows of his worries. He scooped her into his arms, inhaling the familiar scent of her hair and feeling a rare sense of peace. Little did he know the small gesture he had made that morning, the simple act of giving $15 to a stranger, would ripple far beyond his imagination. Unbeknownst to him, the consequences of his kindness were only beginning to unfold, and the quiet life he had struggled to maintain was about to shift in ways he could never foresee. As he kissed Grace's forehead and settled her into bed, Ethan felt a strange mixture of exhaustion and anticipation. Something had changed today, though he could not name it. All he knew was that tomorrow, and perhaps the days beyond, might not be quite as ordinary as they had always been. Ethan Parker returned home the next evening, the sky painted in streaks of orange and purple as the sun dipped behind the apartment buildings. The familiar creak of the stairwell greeted him, but something felt different, uneasy. As he approached the entrance to his building, a sight froze him in his tracks. 5 black SUVs were parked along the street outside, their tinted windows reflecting the fading light like silent, watchful eyes. His heart raced. He had no idea why so many vehicles were outside his modest apartment, and a flicker of panic coursed through him. Neighbors stood on their doorsteps, murmuring in hushed tones. "Did you see all those cars?" one whispered, glancing at Ethan. Another shook her head, fingers pressed to her lips. Ethan's mind spun, trying to rationalize what he saw. Was it a mistake? A film crew? Or something worse? His hand tightened around the strap of Grace's backpack, still slung over his shoulder from the previous day's school drop-off. As he stepped inside, Ethan called out softly, "Grace, I'm home." There was no response, only the soft hum of the radiator and the faint scent of dinner from a neighbor's apartment. Something told him this wasn't ordinary. His footsteps echoed as he moved toward the living room, each creak of the floorboards amplifying his growing anxiety. Before he could reach the door to his apartment, a familiar voice stopped him. "Ethan Parker?" A woman stood in the hallway outside his apartment, framed by the last rays of sunlight. It was her, the woman from the street yesterday, Lila Monroe. She was impeccably dressed now, not a trace of the disheveled coat or frazzled hair that had made her seem so vulnerable before. Her smile was confident, almost knowing, and she held herself with the kind of poise that suggested she was used to commanding attention. "Lila." Ethan's voice was cautious, wary. What are you doing here?" She tilted her head slightly, a playful yet measured gesture. "I wanted to thank you properly," she said softly, but with an undercurrent of intention that made Ethan's stomach tighten. "Yesterday, you were kind when no one else would be. That doesn't go unnoticed." Ethan hesitated. The $15 he had given her yesterday seemed so insignificant now, but her presence, the mysterious authority she exuded, made it feel monumental. "I didn't do it for thanks," he said carefully. I saw someone in need." Lila's eyes softened, though the smile didn't fade. "And that's why you're special, Ethan. Not many people would do what you did." She paused, letting her words settle, her gaze lingering on him. "I want to offer my gratitude. I want to help." Ethan swallowed hard. He wanted to believe her, but the SUVs outside, the whispers of neighbors, and the sudden intrusion of her presence filled him with suspicion. "Help?" he asked cautiously. I don't understand." Lila stepped closer, her voice lowering to a confidential tone. "Think of it as a reward for honesty, for kindness. People like you don't come around often. I'd like to invest in your future, in your daughters." Her words were carefully chosen, sincere yet deliberate, designed to disarm him, that Ethan's mind raced. He wanted to trust her, but the rational part of him, the part that worried about bills, responsibilities, and life's constant uncertainties, hesitated. I don't know if I can accept anything, he admitted, fidgeting with the strap of his worn jacket. I barely have enough for rent as it is. Lila's smile widened, warm yet enigmatic. You don't have to decide now. I just wanted you to know that you won't go unnoticed. She handed him a small card, embossed with her name and a contact number. If you ever need me, call. But remember, this isn't about money. It's about recognizing what you're willing to do for others. Ethan took the card, staring at it as if it might hold the answers to the questions racing through his mind. His instincts told him to be cautious, yet a part of him, the part that had been starved of hope and kindness, felt a spark of excitement he hadn't felt in months. The sound of the stairwell door closing behind her made him jump slightly. He glanced outside again at the SUVs, still parked ominously along the street. The sight made his stomach churn. What is going on? He whispered to himself. He tried to calm his nerves, imagining a rational explanation. Maybe her associates were nearby, ensuring she arrived safely. Maybe it was an elaborate misunderstanding. Ethan knew he needed perspective. He dialed Cameron Rivers' number immediately, needing someone to ground him. Cameron answered after 2 rings. Hey, Ethan, everything okay? His friend's voice was calm, reassuring, as if he sensed trouble without knowing the details. Cameron, you're not going to believe this, Ethan said quickly, recounting the SUVs, the woman, and the card. I don't know what's happening, and I don't know if I should trust her. Cameron sighed. Ethan, take a deep breath. People like that don't usually appear for no reason. But don't let your guard down. Be polite, be cautious, and don't make any commitments until you know her intentions. And remember, don't let charm cloud judgment. Ethan nodded, even though Cameron couldn't see him. His mind replayed the events of the past 24 hours. The small act of giving, the gratitude in Lila's eyes, the SUVs waiting outside, and now her poised, mysterious demeanor. Something had shifted. His life, which had been predictable and heavy with routine, was suddenly thrust into a strange new tension. After ending the call, Ethan set the card on the kitchen counter, staring at it as he moved about the apartment. Grace's school projects were scattered across the table, and he glanced at her tiny handwriting, her innocent notes and drawings. She deserved stability, happiness, a life without fear or stress. And yet, today's strange events hinted that help, or perhaps temptation, had arrived in the most unexpected form. Ethan tried to shake off the unease, but his thoughts kept returning to Lila, her eyes, her smile, the way she had made him feel seen for the first time in months. A shiver ran down his spine as he realized that he was standing at a crossroads, one that could change not only his life, but the life of his daughter forever. The SUVs outside, the whispers of neighbors, and the weight of uncertainty pressed upon him. Yet somewhere deep within, he felt a flicker of anticipation. He knew one thing for certain. Tomorrow, everything could be different. The mundane rhythm of bills, work, and responsibilities could give way to something unpredictable, something dangerous, or something transformative. And though he didn't yet understand the full consequences of his kindness, he sensed that the encounter with Lila Monroe was only the beginning. Ethan Parker exhaled slowly, attempting to steady the tumultuous thoughts swirling in his mind. He set a chair by the window, looking at the SUVs parked outside as shadows lengthened in the dusk. The city hummed quietly, indifferent to his worries. Yet within him, a storm had begun to stir, a storm that promised tension, uncertainty, and perhaps even temptation. Tomorrow would bring answers, but for tonight, all he could do was wait, hope, and prepare for the unexpected. The next morning, Ethan Parker awoke before the sun, his mind heavy with thoughts of the previous evening. The memory of Lila Monroe's confident smile lingered in his mind like a flickering candle, warm, bright, and impossible to ignore. He dressed quietly, careful not to wake Grace, and made his way to the small kitchen. The apartment felt unusually still, the shadows from the early dawn stretching across the worn floorboards. Ethan poured himself a cup of coffee, the bitter aroma filling the small space, grounding him in routine. Yet, despite the ordinary morning, he couldn't shake the sense that his life had shifted overnight. Lila's presence, the card she had left, and the SUVs waiting outside haunted him. The uncertainty was intoxicating in a way he hadn't felt in months, leaving him both anxious and strangely alive. Grace appeared in the doorway, her small feet padding softly against the floor. "Morning, Dad," she said, rubbing her eyes. Ethan smiled, hiding the tension coiling in his chest. "Morning, Pumpkin," he replied, pulling her into a gentle hug. "Did you sleep well?" "Yes," she said brightly, brushing past him to sit at the kitchen table. Ethan watched her, noticing the innocent trust in her gaze. His daughter's simple happiness reminded him of what he had to protect. Yet, the events of the previous night tugged at him persistently, whispering that life might offer more than survival. It could offer temptation, opportunity, and risk. By mid-morning, Ethan had returned from work errands, still uneasy. The SUVs from the night before had disappeared, but the sense of suspense remained. He had rehearsed possible scenarios in his mind. Perhaps Lila was wealthy. Perhaps she had connections that could help him in Grace. Or perhaps she had intentions he couldn't yet comprehend. He shook his head, trying to focus on practicalities, rent, bills, groceries, but the thought of Lila intruded constantly, like a shadow at the corner of his vision. Around noon, there was a soft knock on the door. Ethan's pulse quickened as he crossed the small living room. Peering through the peephole, he saw Lila, calm and composed, holding a small box of groceries and a neatly folded scarf. She smiled, the kind of smile that could disarm even the most guarded heart. "I thought you might need some help today," she said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "You looked tired yesterday." Ethan swallowed, unsure of how to respond. I can manage," he said cautiously. But the warmth in Lila's eyes, the genuine tone of her voice, made him hesitate. Against his better judgment, he allowed her to stay. She moved with grace, placing groceries on the counter, arranging them efficiently, and somehow making the apartment feel less heavy, less burdened by its constant weight of stress. As the morning melted into afternoon, Ethan found himself talking more than he had in weeks. Lila listened intently, asking questions about Grace, his work, and the small routines that kept him going. He shared snippets of his struggles, hesitating at times, yet feeling a rare sense of relief in voicing them aloud. Lila's presence was soothing, almost intoxicating, and Ethan couldn't deny the pull he felt toward her. A mixture of gratitude, admiration, and something more complex, something dangerous. Around 3 p.m., Ethan received a call from Cameron. "Hey, man, how's it going?" Cameron's voice was casual, but Ethan sensed the caution beneath it. "It's complicated," Ethan admitted. "She's here again, helping around the apartment. I don't know what to make of it. She's kind, but there's something else, something I can't place." Cameron's sigh was audible through the line. "Ethan, listen. You need to be careful. People like her, wealthy, mysterious, sometimes come with strings attached. Don't let kindness or loneliness cloud your judgment. You're responsible not just for yourself, but for Grace." Ethan nodded, though Cameron couldn't see him. The words echoed in his mind. He had always prided himself on his integrity, his ability to care for others without expecting anything in return. But now, standing in the quiet of his apartment, watching Lila arrange groceries and smile at small, mundane things, he realized that moral certainty was fragile when faced with real human connection. Late afternoon, Lila had moved to the small living room, sipping tea and chatting lightly. Ethan observed her, noticing how effortlessly she filled the space, her confidence a stark contrast to his own weariness. He felt drawn to her, a pull he couldn't explain. It wasn't physical desire alone, it was admiration, longing for understanding, and perhaps, at a deeper level, a hunger for validation that had been missing in his life for years. Grace entered the room, carrying her school books. She paused, watching the interaction between her father and Lila. "Hi," she said softly, sensing the tension in the air. Lila's smile softened, and she knelt to Grace's level. "Hello, Grace. Your dad tells me you're very smart." Grace's eyes sparkled at the attention, and Ethan felt a mixture of gratitude and unease. He wanted his daughter to feel love and care, but he also wanted to protect her from the complications and dangers that seemed to be creeping into their lives. He was torn between trust and caution, between desire and responsibility, feeling the weight of the decisions he might soon face. As evening approached, Lila prepared to leave, placing a hand briefly on Ethan's arm. "I'll see you tomorrow," she said softly, her tone almost intimate, almost daring. Ethan felt a strange heat rise in his chest, the pull of temptation stronger than he had anticipated. He knew he shouldn't read too much into it, but the emotional tension was undeniable. Once the door closed, Ethan leaned against the wall, exhaling slowly. His mind replayed the day, the kindness he had extended, the gratitude he had received, and the subtle, unspoken connection that had grown between him and Lila. He felt guilt for the thought, yet he couldn't deny the emotional stirring she had awakened within him. Sitting at the small kitchen table, he stared at the card she had left and the scattered groceries, realizing that the simple act of helping a stranger had turned into something far more complex. His sense of moral clarity was being tested, his emotions stretched to new limits, and a line between gratitude and temptation blurred dangerously. Ethan Parker knew one thing with certainty: the days ahead would not be simple. His life, once predictable and burdened with routine, had shifted into a realm of uncertainty, emotional tension, and moral complexity. The presence of Lila Monroe had introduced a subtle, yet undeniable force into his life, a force that promised both hope and risk. And as he closed his eyes that night, listening to Grace's soft breathing from the next room, he realized that tomorrow might bring choices he wasn't yet ready to face, but would have no choice. Ethan Parker awoke to the sound of birds chirping outside his apartment window, the morning sun casting warm light across the worn floorboards. Despite the calm exterior, his mind raced. The previous days had been a whirlwind of uncertainty, emotion, and moral tension. He glanced at the small card Lila Monroe had left on the counter, its edges now slightly curled from repeated handling. The thought of her stirred both curiosity and caution within him. Grace bounded into the kitchen, her backpack slung over one shoulder, her energy undimmed by the lingering shadows of their recent troubles. "Dad, can we go to the park after breakfast?" she asked, eyes shining with excitement. Ethan smiled, ruffling her hair. "Of course, Pumpkin. But first, we need to finish breakfast." As she chattered about school and friends, Ethan found a moment of clarity. No matter what challenges lay ahead, his primary responsibility was the safety and happiness of his daughter. The morning passed with an almost ordinary rhythm, the small apartment filled with the familiar sounds of cooking, laughter, and the occasional scrape of a chair against the floor. Yet, Ethan couldn't ignore the sense that change was imminent. Just as he began to wonder what the day might hold, a low rumble of engines outside drew his attention. Stepping toward the window, he saw 5 black SUVs parked neatly along the street, their presence commanding and mysterious. His pulse quickened, but this time, fear was tempered by a sense of anticipation. The vehicles were the same from days before, yet the situation felt different. The people inside seemed purposeful rather than threatening. A moment later, the doorbell rang, crisp and insistent. Ethan approached cautiously, opening the door to find Lila standing there, accompanied by 2 formally dressed individuals who exuded professionalism and authority. "Good morning, Ethan," Lila said warmly. "I hope I'm not intruding. I wanted you to meet some people who've been following your story and your kindness." She gestured to the others. "This is Daniel and Maria. They're here to offer assistance." Ethan's eyebrows knitted together. "Assistance?" he asked carefully, unsure whether to trust the explanation. Daniel spoke first, his voice calm and measured. "Mr. Parker, your act of kindness yesterday, giving $15 to a stranger, was noticed by people who value integrity and compassion. We'd like to offer you and your daughter an opportunity for stability, education, and a chance to improve your circumstances." Maria handed him an envelope, its weight heavier than expected. Inside were documents detailing a small trust fund, educational support for Grace, and a job opportunity tailored to Ethan's skills. Ethan felt a mixture of disbelief, gratitude, and awe. The weight of his daily struggle, the constant worry for Grace, had lifted slightly, replaced by a cautious hope. Lila stepped closer, her smile gentle but knowing. Ethan, you didn't ask for this. You didn't expect reward. That's why it matters. Your actions were genuine, and people recognize that. This is the result of your integrity, your willingness to help without expectation. Ethan swallowed, emotion rising in his throat. He glanced at Grace, who had stepped forward, curiosity evident in her wide eyes. Is this really for us? She asked softly. Yes, Pumpkin, Ethan said, bending to her level and taking her small hands in his. This is for us because your dad did the right thing. Grace hugged him tightly, and for the first time in a long while, Ethan felt the heavy weight of worry ease, replaced by warmth and relief. After the initial excitement, Ethan and Grace spent the afternoon unpacking groceries, organizing documents, and making plans for the new opportunities presented to them. Lila remained for a time, offering guidance, assistance, and gentle conversation, yet never overstepping boundaries. Her presence was reassuring, an anchor amidst the whirlwind of change. As evening approached, Lila prepared to leave, her departure calm and purposeful. Ethan, she said softly, placing a hand briefly on his arm. Remember that kindness is never wasted. You've shown that even small gestures can ripple far beyond what we imagine. Take care of yourself and Grace, and make the most of the opportunities you've earned. Ethan nodded, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. Thank you, Lila, for everything. I don't know how to repay you. You don't need to, she replied. Your actions spoke for themselves. That's more than enough. With a final smile, she left, the sound of her footsteps fading down the hallway. Ethan watched until she disappeared from view, the weight of her influence lingering, a subtle reminder of the power of integrity and compassion. Once the door closed, Ethan turned to Grace, who was still clutching her backpack, excitement and wonder evident in her eyes. Dad, do you think things will be okay now? She asked. Ethan crouched down, meeting her gaze. Yes, Pumpkin, he said, a smile breaking across his face. Things are going to be okay. We're going to have a chance to live a little easier, and we'll make the most of it together. The rest of the evening was quiet but joyful. Ethan prepared a simple dinner, and they shared stories about school, work, and their hopes for the future. The apartment, once heavy with worry and stress, felt lighter, filled with a sense of possibility. For the first time in months, Ethan allowed himself to imagine a life where he and Grace could thrive, a life touched by kindness, hope, and the unpredictable ripple of human compassion. Later, as Grace slept, Ethan sat by the window, staring at the darkened street below. The SUVs were gone, and the city hummed softly, indifferent yet alive. He reflected on the events of the past few days, the stranger on the street, the act of giving, the mysterious turn of fortune, and the subtle emotional currents that had tested his character. He understood now that life was unpredictable, that moral choices, kindness, and integrity could lead to outcomes beyond imagination. Ethan Parker smiled softly to himself, the tension of uncertainty replaced by a quiet sense of resolve. He had faced temptation, doubt, and moral conflict, yet he had remained true to his values. In doing so, he had secured not only his daughter's future, but also a deeper understanding of what it meant to act with honesty, compassion, and courage. And though he knew that life would continue to present challenges, Ethan felt prepared. With Grace by his side, with opportunities now within reach, and with the quiet reminder of the power of kindness, he was ready to face whatever tomorrow might bring. The ripple of a single act had changed everything. And in that change, he discovered hope, love, and a sense of purpose he had thought lost forever.